welcome all. Thank you for coming to this Introduction to Wanderer class. For those of you that have not met me or don't know me, my name is Saro. I'm the current Director of Combat and also one of the community coordinators for Wormhole community here at Eve University. We do a lot when it comes to exploring and working and navigating through wormholes, and that is ultimately what Wanderer is all about. Wanderer is a tool that is used to help you navigate while you're exploring, particularly wormholes, because we have no way of knowing how wormholes are connected if we don't map them. So that's what Wanderer is. It's a mapper. The very base functionality of Wander is to generate nodes on this map. So we're going to do that right now. Hopefully we have a wormhole in here. We do. Alright, so unfortunately it looks like Wormhole Campus found another not very fun wormhole. Very sad. Alright, so what Wander lets us do is it lets us travel through wormholes, and as we do so, it's going to automatically populate that map. So right now, what I'm doing is I'm moving from this cake system over here into this Bravo system over here. And we already had both of these on the map, so let's move on now to the next system on this map. So we're going to go to the next wormhole that we scan down in here, and when we do so, we can see that there's no real next system here, right? And what Wander does is it uses ESI, which is the API for EVE Online, to query your character's location. And by doing so, it's able to track you, such that when you jump a wormhole, it is actually able to see that you have done so, and it's able to populate that on a map. So you can see here that when we jumped this wormhole, it has now populated FTAC-M, the system that I am in right now on this map. When I do so, I'm able to then populate some information about it. So in our wormhole community naming scheme, this system would be called Bravo 1 or B1 because it is the first system down our Bravo chain past Bravo. And I'm able to name it as such in Wander. That way, when we are talking amongst each other about, well, we need to go get to whatever system it is, well, we can all communicate in the same way. We can say, all right, well, this is Bravo 1. Now, the nice thing about this map is that it is the same for everybody. Everybody who's looking at this map is going to see the same thing at the same time. So if I were to move this B1, or if someone else were to move this B1, or you can see someone up here just moved this Kyra while I was talking, it will change it for everyone else. What it also means is that when you are moving systems around in Wander, there's a little bit of synchronization that has to happen. So there's potentially up to, in our wormhole community, like 30 people that could be touching this map at the same time. And Wander can get behind a little bit. So always refresh the page before doing major adjustments to the map. Otherwise, what could happen is that you're moving systems that someone else is actively moving at the same time, and weird stuff can happen because of that. How did Wanderer know that I moved here, and how does it know that I'm here? You can see that this system here has a little sort of yellow icon, whereas some of these other systems have little white icons that tell me that other people are there. Wanderer tracks you, and it follows your characters, and the way you configure that is from this top right menu, where you can configure which of your characters are being tracked, and then which of the characters it's actually following. The following character, what that means is that when you jump a wormhole, it'll pre-select that system. So you can see now that this B1 has this sort of like purplish outline to it. And the reason why you want to have a system selected is going to be so you can interact with it in other ways. So as an example, if I wanted to paste the signatures that are in here, all I have to do is Control-A, Control-C in this probe scanning window. And then if I Control-V anywhere into this Chrome tab, it will paste the signatures into whatever system is currently selected. By having my scanning character, which is currently Nibbles, identified as my following character. That means I don't have to click on every single system, every single system as I'm jumping. Instead, what will happen is when I jump, it'll automatically go to the next one. So you can see that here if I move back into Bravo. Come on. All right, there you go. If I move back into Bravo, it moves the currently selected system to be Bravo. So if I were exploring a new chain, I would be able to easily just Control C and then go over here and Control V. Now this has already been scanned down, so there's no reason for me to actually change any of that. We're going to start with a little bit details that just has to relate with basically the Wander applicator. So I'm going to close out my game for just a little bit, and we're just going to focus on Wander here for a second. I want to talk about some features that are related to these nodes that we've generated on the map. The first one is that when we generate new systems, you'll notice that by default they are this gray icon, right? Now we can make them be different colors. We can also have a feature enabled that tells us if they are K-space or known space systems. So let's start with the known space thing. See this little cloud icon down here at the bottom right of my screen? If I click it, I can toggle the highlighting for K-space. So that lets me know A, that this is not nullsec and not a wormhole, and B, it lets me to know what region of space it's going to. So for example, this is a yellow background, it's going into a Mars space. This is a red background, it's going into Minmatar space. This is a blue background, it's going into Caldari space. This feature is also available, I want to say here in Systems. So if you go into your settings and then Systems, highlight low and high security systems, same thing. It's the same feature. So there's two ways to toggle it. The next thing we can do with systems related to coloring is we can change their statics. Now here at Wormhole Community, informally we use this yellowish color to signify that the system is occupied. I can change the status by right-clicking the system and then going to status. Here I have various different statuses that I can set to that change the color of it as needed. Another feature that I have is that I can lock systems. So if I try to move Cake because it is locked, I can't actually do it. If I try to block any other system, well, I can do that all I want. If I wanted to keep a system locked, I can right-click it, whoops, I'm a little bit too low, and lock it in place. You can see this little lock appears and then it can't be moved. Now only admins on a map can lock systems. On the Wormhole Community map, the only admin is going to be the lead of Wormhole Community, which is Mora. I guess technically myself and Bates also have access, but I digress. The next thing we can do related to nodes is going to be that we can ping them. So we don't actually have this integrated into Discord yet, but the ping rally generates a ping, and what we can say is whatever we want, and it'll actually generate a pop-up on everyone's wanderer that is currently using the Wormhole Community map. Everyone will see this ping up here, they'll get this sort of pulsating blue banding, and then there's also a Discord bot plugin option where this can generate a ping into Discord. So very useful, very helpful to get the point across that there's content somewhere that you're trying to share with others. The status and ping features are pretty useful because they allow us to communicate information about a system visually without even having to really say anything. So the whole thing about exploring in JSpace is that you want to be as quick as possible. Wormhole Community has done a whole lot to revamp its naming conventions, even its use of a mapper. We used to use Pathfinder, because you survive in JSpace by being quick. You get content by being quick. So everything about mappers is usually designed to expediting the whole exploration process. So next we're going to do two things. First we're going to go through map settings, and then we're going to go through all of the widgets, starting with the most important one, which is the signatures widget. So let's go through map settings first. Map settings can be accessed from the bottom right of your menu. It's the little gear icon, and these are settings specific to you. They're map user settings. The first one is the compact menu bar. So by default, you get this large menu bar that spans the entire vertical length of your screen. You can turn it into just a little sort of drop-down menu up here if you want. You can disable the background pattern or enable the background pattern of the map instead if you don't want to see those little snap dots. You can also change the tone of it. You can make it the soft, sort of slightly brighter background, I guess, if you would prefer that. And you can change the location of certain things, such as the mini-map, which you see down here, right? Well, I guess it's behind stuff right now, but anyway. As well as changing the theme to the Pathfinder theme. Pathfinder is another mapper. You can also add additional themes to Wander if you're self-hosting it. Now, the interesting thing about changing between the default theme and the Pathfinder theme is that it also changes the functionality of your actual click and drag. So if I'm in the default theme and I want to drag the map, I just left click. If I left click, I am dragging the entire map around. If I want to actually select multiple systems, I have to hold down shift and then click and drag, like so. And I've selected both of these systems to be moved. If I switch to the Pathfinder theme instead, it follows the Pathfinder functionality, where if you click anywhere on screen, left click, it's going to automatically do a selection box. If you want to drag the whole box, then you have to right click. So right clicking in the Pathfinder configuration is going to be what actually moves the map around. Moving on to Sorry about that. Moving on to system settings, what we are dealing with here is basically the ability to do two things. One is the highlighting that we already talked about. The other one is the auto select splashed. So remember when we were talking earlier about that follow setting, where if I jumped my character that is configured as my following character, right, it automatically selected that as highlighted it. Well, what if I had a different character, right? So let's say I have Cake currently selected right now, and I have multiple characters that I'm currently tracking that are online right now. So if I were to take the systems and I would select auto select splashed, and now I took a different character and then I got him or her into a different system, then the same thing would happen. And this is helpful if you are scanning with multiple characters at once. Personally, I find it very difficult to scan with multiple characters at once. But there's certain use cases where you might be doing that, or maybe you're just in a different section of the chain, or you have like a hunting character and like a primary scanning character, and you're just updating SIGs anyway. Who knows? Whatever the case is, when I go and I take this secondary character that is not configured as my follow character, I can jump the character into a new system, and the same functionality where it will move that highlighted system, which is again currently Cake because I moved it to Cake, and then I jump a new system with this again not follow character. The same thing will happen is when it moves to the new system, it'll populate that, or it'll rather select that system. All right, moving on from that. The next settings we have are related to connections. So there's two things we can do here. One is a visual change, so we can just make those connections thicker. Some people like that a little bit more. The other one is deleting connections to linked signatures. So as an example, here in Bravo, we said that JBX leads to FMK. So if I have this feature enabled, so where is it? Delete connections, delete signature. If I were to update signatures in Bravo, and where is, let me actually, which one was it? So the actual one, JBX, is the one that should be, it is, okay, so JBX is going to that one. So if I were to take, I do Control C, and I'm going in here and I'm lazy deleting, so I'm updating signatures, and we'll explain what that means. It's deleted, so you can see f.mk is going to get deleted. This connection is also deleted, which becomes a visual identifier that you are removing this system by removing that signature. Of course, that's not actually the case. That signature is still there. So let me go and fix that on the map real quick. Too many screens. Alright, what's next on our settings here? Let's see, connection settings, we talked about those. Signature settings, link signatures on Splash and show Unsplash signatures. So these are related. So if you see under some of these systems here, there's these little pips. They're enabled with the show Unsplash signatures. There's a couple of things that these help us with doing. So it tells us if there is spots that we can explore that haven't already been explored. Now, in this case here, I can see there's one pip. So that means there's one unjumped hole according to this. Now, it's a little bit incorrect because we know that there are two holes going out of this system. There's two ways you can sort of use this feature. One is everyone needs to link signatures to your link systems to your signatures, or nobody needs to do it. And in either case, you can sort of use it in the same way. So in this case, because nothing is linked, I know I have two pips. Well, I have two connections, and I can visually look at that, and I know that all the holes have been jumped. Conversely, if I look here at A23, I see that there are 4 pips, there are 4 wormholes. However, there are only 1, 2, 3 attached holes. So either these signatures are out of date or there is an unjumped hole in A23. The other way I can use this feature is, again, if everyone were to link their signatures and they said, okay, well, WAG is the one that goes back to cake and JBX is the one that goes to the nullsec hole. Well then, hurrah, there are no pips, there are no unsplash signatures. There is an additional feature that we're going to go into a little bit later that talks about how we can make those pips have a certain color, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Let me just clear this here. Boop, boop, there we go. Alright, what's next? What did I say I was going to talk about next? More settings. We have a couple more to go through. We talked about those. Link signature on Splash. So we kind of talked about linking signatures on Splash, or we've seen it at least. We haven't really talked about it. So let me show you what I mean by that. What I'm going to do is, Nibbles is still in Bravo, right? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of this B1 right here. And I know I have 2 wormholes in here, and I'm going to go out the nullsec hole. And when I go out the nullsec hole, apparently I have to warp to it. I drifted 400 kilometers off of it. It's going to give me a little pop-up that asks me, well, which signature did you jump? And I remember that I jumped out of JBX. And by clicking that, it'll automatically populate that the JBX wormhole signature leads to FMK, thereby making this pip go away, the one that went to a random wormhole. So that is what that feature does. Let me get Nibbles back into Bravo, and then I do see I have some questions. Moving on, so we talked about the signature settings, and now finally we're getting to widgets. So I'm going to activate all the widgets. I personally don't use all these widgets by default, but I'm going to turn them all on, and we're going to start going through widgets. I'm going to go through widgets in kind of a weird order. I'm going to start with the signatures widget because that's the meat and potatoes of Wanderer, and then I will go through sort of all the other widgets on my screen like a clockwise manner. So let's start with the signatures widget. The signatures widget, which I'm going to make just a little bit wider so we can see all the columns in it very easily, is how you track the signatures in a system. You are able to also configure some additional columns. You can configure some additional columns in here in terms of the updated it, the description column, so on and so forth. You can do some coloring, right? So we can turn that off, and you can see that if I do, then all the signatures are just kind of grayed out. Otherwise, you have some color coding where unscanned signatures show up as red, wormholes show up as blue, and then everything else is green. You can also filter out some stuff that you don't want to see. So, for example, I like to show ships, drones and charges, structures, starbases, deployable. I like to have all of those turned off, because what happens if you're scanning with combat probes and you control C out of a scan window where you have ships, those signatures get added to Wanderer too. Wanderer doesn't know to drop those off, so you can just have them deselected. Personally, I kind of fixed that issue by not having them show up. They're filtered out in game if I am not actively trying to hunt something with probes. The functionality of the signature window is something that is very helpful when you are trying to see the signatures themselves as they get updated throughout the day. What do I mean by that? So, okay, let's say we're here in Bravo, and let's say somebody's been running all of these combat sites, right? So let's say we no longer have any of these green sites. We do Control A, we add I highlighted to, and I'm going to Control C these signatures, and I'm going to turn on this lazy delete feature here. When I press Control V, you're going to see these get highlighted in red, and then I have this undo button here that is here for 6 more seconds, and during that time, if I don't react, what will happen is that these signatures will be fully removed. Of course, I can fully add them back at any time, and they'll get populated appropriately and all that good stuff. But that's how lazy delete works, and you can configure the time for that lazy delete for here. You either do it immediately with no undo button, or you have a 30 seconds maximum undo. I will note that when you are undoing those actions, that is the only undo action in all of Wanderer. If you manually delete, so I'm just going to copy the system's name here real quick. If you manually delete a system off of Wanderer, there is no undo button for that. You can't Control Z. What we will do, though, is we're just going to add this back so that we don't lose that. So there is no undoing if you delete one or many systems at the time, right? And I'm sure someone's freaking out that I was about to delete all of Alpha Chain. I do want to talk about some additional featuring that exists for wormhole signatures. So pretty much any signature, you can double click on it and you can add a description, like in here, and then it'll show up as first of all, you'll get like a little notification that there is a description. You can hover over it and it will show up there. It also shows up in its own column if you have that column enabled from the user interface description column. But for wormholes, you're able to do a couple more things. So one of them you've already seen. By doing that auto link on Splash, it lets us populate the leads too, right? Wormholes, you can also configure their type. And this is interesting for two very specific reasons. One is, if I have this JBX pip right here, right? So I can hover over it and I know that one of my unsplashed quote-unquote SIGs is JBX. And I see that JBX is of wormhole type K346. Well, K346 is a special type of wormhole. We know where K346 wormholes go. We know that those wormholes go to nullsec, so that'll turn that pip into the appropriate color for a nullsec hole. And then additionally, we know that K346 wormholes have a certain size to them. So if we then link that system, or sorry, link that signature to a system and the type is also populated, well, and it didn't want to do it there. Just refresh Wander because I'm doing all sorts of shenanigans here. Let's do it this way. I'm just going to re-jump this hole to make. So that was the JBX signature. We're going to say it's a wormhole. And again, we don't have to say it's a wormhole when we're normally doing this because I'm going to have the signature already scanned down. It's already going to get that it's a wormhole. I never scan down this signature, so I'm having to populate it manually so that I don't screw this up for everyone else. So anyway, moving on. So I have this the signature properly notified as a K346. I'm going to jump it, and when I do, it's going to make that pip go away as soon as I link it. Now this is a large sized hole, so it's going to get no special identifier on the connection, but let's say it wasn't a large size hole. Let's say that this, or wasn't this type of hole, let's say it was let's say it was a Q003 that also goes to nullsec, which is a Frig hole. Well, when I do that, it'll also populate the details of the connection. So because that is a Frig hole, it's going to appropriately mark that hole as a frigate or a small size hole. So that is a reason why you may want to use the type information on a wormhole when you are also populating the leads too. So that's the thought there. I will say for the wormhole community members that are on this class right now, we do not require either of those two things. They are nice to haves. What we do require is that you do note the size of wormholes, which are not standard. So a standard wormhole is always going to be a large hole. It's going to allow battleships through. If it's anything but, especially if it's a Frig hole, it should be notified or notated, and we'll talk about doing that in a little bit. That is everything related to the signatures widget. So now we're going to go on to other widgets. So let's start top left. So top left widget, and I am cloaked up here. Let me get back to Wander. Is going to be the system information widget. The system information widget gives us a couple of things. So first of all, we can copy the system name itself, right? We can also edit the description for that. It's the same thing we do if we double click on the system, right? We can change all these things here. I realize now we didn't talk about labels and other stuff when we were talking about system nodes, so we'll get back to that. We also have links to the zkill board, which is obviously the kill board for that system, the anoik.is, which is the wormhole information for that system, and then the .lan, which is not very helpful for wormhole systems, but it is very helpful when you have a nullsec system in your chain and you want to very quickly be able to figure out what the delta looks like nearby. So this is a pretty dead region of space. I guess that makes sense because we're in NPC null here. We also are able to see any description that was given to this. So if I were to put some description in here, we are able to see that the description shows up here. The next one is going to be the local. So if there was anybody in here other than me, or even myself, I would see that. So if I go back and select Bravo, I can see, well, I'm here in Bravo. If I go to Cake, where I can already see that there's a bunch of people docked, I can see all those people in here. I can show what ships they're in. I can add an additional notifier that tells me the name of their ship as well. And that's how that works. We can also see the local or people that are logged into the system throughout the chain, because there's these little sort of silhouettes of people you can hover over. Or at the top right of your screen, if you hit this little hashtag, it'll show you all of the people that are in the map, where they're at, what ship they're in, what the name of their ship is, so that if you see them on dscan, you don't freak out. Moving on, we have the ability to make comments on systems. So you can see I added a comment here yesterday. These comments support Markdown, and you can put them anywhere. So I can add another comment in here, and this time it's going to be bolded and all sorts of good stuff, right? And that's how the comment widget works. Next one is going to be kills. If there were kills in that system as notified by zkill, you will know that that's the case. So let's see if I can find something with kills in it. Apparently there's nothing that's happened in this whole chain. It's kind of funny. Let's add a system we know there have been kills in. The most dangerous place in all of New Eden. There's no way. Could be that the zkill integration's just not working right now. Oh yeah, no, this is, no, that was just now. There should be at least one kill in there. Okay, no, I just won't worry about that. Whatever the case is, normally you have kills that populate into here, and that is how you are able to tell. You also get an additional notifier on the actual system. It's like a little lightning bolt. Unfortunately, for some reason, it just looks like the API is not working, either for zkill or for Wanderer calling out. So we can't actually see that notifier right now. Moving on to routes. Routes are another very useful feature, and there's two types of routes that we have in zkill, in Wanderer. One is routes themselves, and the other one is user routes. The difference between the two is that routes are visible for everybody. So as an example, this Staget, I don't know why it's here for everybody, but we probably don't need Staget for everybody to know how to get to. If you have a personal place you want to keep tracked in your routes, that is what user routes are for. Routes themselves, you can do a couple of useful things with. So first of all, let's say I was in Cake and I wanted to get to Jita. Well, I can see it's 5 jumps for me to get to Jita, and this is the chain that I have to go to get there. I can click any system in here, and it'll center my screen on that system. And then additionally, I can right-click a system, and I can have it be set as a waypoint or a destination for any of my characters or all of my characters. So if I say set destination for all my characters, and then I go to my game, I can see that all of my characters have had Futinainen set as their destination here. If you're already in K-space, or if you're just trying to get somewhere, but or reversely, if you're in K-space and trying to get to your chain. So that is how routes work. There's a couple of configurations you can do. So by default, it's going to take the shortest path. You can untoggle that. It'll take the safest path. You also can have it avoid certain types of holes or include certain types of holes based off of what you need to do. So if, for example, you're trying to move a battleship, you might not want it to use frigate and cruiser-sized holes when it is trying to move you from point A to point B. You can add any system to your maps either directly, to your routes either directly by, it looks like for some reason this is in routes, boink. You can add any system to your routes by either right-clicking it and then adding it to user route. In this case, it's removed, so let me just do a different one. So you can add it, what the hell, why is that one in my user routes too? There we go. You can add it to my user routes by right-clicking it, and then it shows up in my user routes. Which one was this? Wrens. So there it is. Oh, hey, we have Wrens in chain. Wrens added to my user routes. You can also remove it by doing the same. And you can do the same from here by adding and searching, or by hitting the menu item and then removing. Very easy, very fun. One way I personally like, if I am doing like a one-off, I need to get home from where I currently am in JSpace. I don't like adding that to my routes because then I have to go back and clean it up, and then this is a very small window for me. What I can do is I can easily just add a system to the map, and then I can click that system, and by default Cake is going to be in here, and I can find out how to get to Cake from Adian by clicking on Adian. So I know if I was in Adian and I wanted to get to Cake, well then the last case space is Futinainen. I would right click it, waypoint set, and then I would have the in-game yellow brick road taking me where I need to go, after which I can just get rid of that hole, or that system rather. So that is the routes widget. Moving on, we have structures. So structures lets us see what structures are in a system. So this Bravo appears to be empty. That's probably going to be a bad example for us here. Let's see if there's any structures in Bravo. My gut says no, otherwise we would have added them by now. No. Okay, that's fine. So let's go ahead and add some structures in Cake instead. Actually, here, I don't even have to move nibbles. Cool. Are they all on dscan? They're all on dscan. Okay. So this is a little bit different. So when we want to just Control C and Control V, when we are adding structures, we do it a little bit differently. We have to find our structures widget. Let's get rid of the Fartazar as an example. We have to grab it off of our dscan, and it needs to be on our dscan. And then we hit this little blue icon here. And when we do so, it'll add the structure into the structures widget. We can also configure the corporation. All right, cool beans. So that is the structures widget. And I believe that is it in terms of widgets. I do want to touch on the mini map. It's not technically a widget, but it is helpful for easily navigating around the map. You can click into it and move around as you need to. That is widgets. All right, next we're going to talk about connections. And when we do that, we're going to talk about nodes briefly because I skipped one or two things about how you can add details to your nodes. Next thing is going to be connections. So connections are the things that move us from one JSpace system to another. They are the actual wormholes themselves. And there's a couple of different things we can do to configure and see details around them. So as an example, we've had this alpha for some time. I can click on it and I can see approximately how much mass has passed through it, right? We can not really trust this for a couple of different reasons. One, it relies on people having tracking. Two, it does not account for any modifiers on ships that change their mass, such as examples, Higgs rigs, which double masses of ships, plates, which increase masses of ships, so on and so forth. It's always just going to take the base mass of the ship, rather than the true mass after modifiers, having promons activated, so on and so forth. What else in there is you will see when everyone jumped it. So I can tell when this alpha was first jumped by just scrolling down to the bottom. So I know that this alpha is 7 hours old, and I can hover over this and see that it was hopped at exactly 1:01 p.m., at least Eastern time. I can also sort of infer that by looking at when the alpha sig was scanned, but as you can tell, because we didn't populate the wormhole type, I don't necessarily know which one of these sigs alpha was. I can make some logical guesses on it, right? Because this one's brand new, and it's to this new C4 hole that Marcus is in right now. I know that this one was the Bravo hole because we were scanning it, so I can say that, okay, it was probably this PWP. Actually, I must have gotten these backwards because this one's 7 hours long, so my guess is that this is actually the one that lives to alpha, and that we've since marked these backwards. So let's fix this. Yoink. All right. Cool beans. So that is signatures in this detail here. You can additionally set some modifiers on the wormholes themselves. The first one is whether or not a hole is end of life. So you can see that there's a couple of holes here on our chain that are marked end of life, which means they have less than 4 hours remaining before they implode on themselves. You can also mark the mass status of the hole as either halved of whatever size it can accommodate, right? So we know a C2, whatever it is, N766 can accommodate a total of 2 million pounds going through it. If it's halved, it only has about 1 million left, plus or minus. So we can notify that it has been halved, which makes it yellow. Or you can notify that it's crits, which makes it red. You can see that there's a crit hole right here going to this C5. I wonder what they're doing there. And that'll make it red in this outline. Further, you can modify by saying what size of ship is able to go through it. And it'll populate these little sort of tags on it. So a large hole is the default. All holes are large by default. They can then be a different size from that. So if they can only accommodate medium ships, that means only battle cruisers and below can go through it. You can put an M on it. If it can only accommodate frigates, then it's a small hole. It gets a little S on it. There's actually a special button for frigates because we want to make it very easy for people to be able to mark frig holes as frig holes, because it's very obnoxious to get to a frig hole and only find out that it's a frig hole when you're there. It also helps if you actually read the info on the hole to actually mark it as such when you get there. Going the other way, you can have huge and capital holes, huge and XL or extra large, holes on them. You can see some here in our chain. And that is same thing, but allowing for carriers and dreads and other stuff to actually pass through those holes as well. What else did I want to talk about? I want to talk about nodes. That's what I want to talk about. So when I jumped this hole, you may have noticed that I just went through and I marked this as B1, right? So there's two types of names, two types of identifiers that you can do in here. There's a temporary name, and the reason why it's called a temporary name is because if I take this system and I then delete it, and then I add it back, you'll see that that B1 identifier is gone, right? However, that is in contrast to the custom name. If I put something in the custom name, and then I delete that system, so you can see B1 is added in there, and I delete that system, and then I add it back to Wander, well then it retains the custom name. We also have labels. So there's a couple of different labels you can add in here. So you can add a custom label. Some corporations use this to identify what corporation ticker lives there. We use this to identify our community drop points or our cargo drop points for buyback in Wormhole community. You can use some non-custom labels. So if you just right-click the node, you're able to add some labels for just some common stuff that is used for like lettering and such. Oops. You can also add a custom label from there as well. You can clear your labels from here. Additionally, you can add a tag, which is similar to a label, but it shows up in the node instead of on top of the node and has a similar functionality. You cannot add more than one tag though. I didn't talk as much about statics as I wanted to, so it's when we are looking at wormholes, you'll notice that a lot of them have sort of these C2, C3, or C2 low sec, C2 high sec, low sec. A lot of holes have what are known as static wormholes, and if you look in the system information window, you can hover over those and it'll tell you some information about those statics, including the size, the lifetime of those holes. If you populate the wormhole type in your signatures window, you can also hover over there and it'll give you the same information. So that is an additional just piece of information that you can get, is the wormhole static information. Pretty much anywhere you see it, you can hover over it and you will see the details of that static type. So other features, what are those other features? The first one is Wander is open source and you are able to contribute to its development. The Wander developers are very awesome. They have a Discord you can chat with them in as well. There's a ton of good documentation in their Discord, and you can self-host your Wander instance if you want. When you self-host, you're going to do it through a Dockerized solution, and then you're also able to access the public instance of Wander from wander.ltd. And you can use wander.ltd to have your own private map. The Eve Uni Wanderer instance does not allow for private maps. This is primarily for resource constraints. We have a lot of members, so we only have the maps that are accessible for the general population and the LSC population, low sec community. And the Wormhole community map is gated behind an ACL. And we'll talk about ACLs in a second. Moving on from the actual Wander GitHub, you can also get documentation from the Wander app itself. So if you hit on these like 3 dots here and then you go to News, you'll see you have a listing of all of the tags and all of the sort of help blog posts, quote unquote, for different Wander features. So you can get a lot of interesting information here. A lot of the stuff that I've covered is actually in this stuff. So if you ever have a question around Wander, go to that news feature and you'll get some details. You can configure maps themselves. So if you go to your maps, and again, you're not going to have these on the Eve Uni Wander, but if you self-host or if you have the usage of the public Wander on wander.ltd, you can configure certain settings on your maps in terms of what is done with temporary and custom labels. You can configure for the map itself what ACL allows access to it. And then finally, you can configure API. Whoops, wrong button. Let's try that again. You can configure API access to it. So the API for Wander is pretty cool. You can read pretty much all CRUD methods for signatures, for systems, for all that cool stuff. You can build bots for it using that. And then you can also modify ACLs through the API. So what are ACLs? ACLs are access control lists. So they control who has access to certain maps. And it lets you configure the ability to access maps and restrict it to certain peoples. This is important for preserving OPSEC in larger corporations. ACLs themselves can also be controlled via APIs. So you can see if I were to like go to a list, I can set an API key for an ACL, and then I can use an API to manage access to my map. That's how Wormhole Community does it, is when you apply an auth to join Wormhole Community, when a CC goes through and actually approves your request, there is a backend API call that happens that adds you to the Wander map. So very useful for larger corporations that need to access your map that way, or that needs to control access to their maps that way. And with that, that is everything that I wanted to cover, guys. So that was a ton of information of me talking at you. I appreciate y'all being very patient and chatting in chat with your questions. At this point, open comms. If you have any questions that you wanted to ask by voice instead, feel free to. For the folks that are more familiar with Wander and that feel like I've missed something that would be helpful for me to cover, let me know and I'll cover it real quick. And if nobody has any questions, there is the class feedback form. I'd love to get some feedback on this class.